Hello and welcome to the History of Movies lecture, America's Storyteller. This is with MO1 Intro to Mass Comm. My name is Professor Kelsey Stewart at Moore Park College. So America's Storyteller is best known to evoke emotions, stepping across the boundaries, and bringing people together. Back in the 15th century, Leonardo da Vinci theorized the idea of reproducing reality. The zoetrope was a cylindrical device that rapidly twirled images inside a cylinder and was actually shown in The Greatest Showman to showcase the inspiration of making dreams a reality, basically the essence of America's Storyteller. Edward Muybridge, an English photographer living in America, studied motion by using multiple angles of photos. His first project was to take multiple photos of a racehorse in order to determine if it picked up all four legs in one stride. By 1880, Muybridge had developed a method for projecting photographic images onto a wall for public viewing. George Eastman was also the founder of Kodak, developed the first roll of film. It was a huge improvement over the heavy metal and glass plates that were used to make individual photos. Eastman created a paper backing that had to be stripped off during the film developing stage. Louis Amy Augustin Leprince was a Frenchman who lived in England, and he invented the first motion picture camera roll and filmed the first motion picture, Roundhay Garden Scene, in 1888. Hannibal Goodwin was another big player. He invented celluloid in 1880. He was a New Jersey minister, and he improved Eastman's roll film in 1889 by using the thin strips of transparent pliable material, which is celluloid, and it could hold a coating of chemicals sensitive to light. So this was a breakthrough invention as it enabled film to move through a camera and be photographed in rapid succession, producing a series of pictures. Celluloid was transparent, and so it was ideal for projection, only illuminating the images with light. So Eastman actually battled Goodwin in a patent, claiming he had developed the film with celluloid. The courts ruled in favor of Goodman, but Eastman's company became a major manufacturer of film stock for motion pictures after buying Goodwin's patents. Here's a picture of the Muybridge's original photography of multiple photos of a racehorse in order to determine if it picked up all four legs in one stride, which it does, as we look at the top row here. So, Thomas Edison and motion pictures. Just like the development of sound recording, Thomas Edison holds the spotlight with motion pictures. In the late 1800s, Edison planned to merge phonographic technology and moving images to create talking pictures, which this actually did not happen until 1927, but he had begun his work on it. Under Edison's directive, as his assistant, William Kennedy Dixon combined the light bulb, Goodwin's celluloid, and Leprince's camera to create another early movie camera, the kinetograph. It was a single viewing system as it developed and began to be called the kinetoscope. The kinetoscope held 50 feet of film that revolved on spools, a similar setup to the old school library microfilm readers. The viewers looked through a hole and saw images moving on a tiny plate. These became popular in New York parlors in 1894. We have the Lumion Brothers here in a Paris cafe in December 28, 1895. They projected short films. So in France, they developed cinematography, a combined camera, film, developer, and projection system. The projection system was revolutionary as it allowed more than one person at a time to see the moving images on a large screen. So in 1895, they projected 10 short films for viewers, and in 3 weeks, 2,500 people had showed up to see them. Edison's Vitascope was also revolutionary. Not to be outdone, Edison renewed his focus on film and patented a large screen system called the Vitascope. This enabled film strips of longer lengths to be projected without interruption and hinted at the potential of movies as a future mass medium. In the Music Hall in New York, Edison showcased shots from a boxing match that launched the short film entertainment industry. Vitascope short films showcasings were seen in traveling carnivals, wax museums, vaudeville theaters, and amusement arcades. The biggest shift came with the adoption of the narrative. So this is when movies began to tell stories. The static films of boxing matches and horses jumping tired audiences quickly, and the rat race of entertaining the masses took off. To quote the text, to become a mass medium, the early silent films had to offer what books achieved, the suspension of disbelief. They had to create narrative worlds that engaged an audience's imagination. The first public movie theater opened in France in 1896 under the direction of Georges Méliès. He was one of the first to transition the scope of reality in movies to a more of a film production. He began producing short fantasy films like Cinderella in 1899. Edwin Porter was the first American filmmaker to adapt Méliès' narrative style to short films. In 1902, he created America's first short film, The Life of an American Fireman. His 1903 film, The Great Train Robbery, introduced the Western genre as well as chase scenes. It was only 11 minutes of film, but it inspired many copycats. So before you picture SpongeBob SquarePants, Nickelodeons were actually originally a form of movie theater. Their name derived from the admission price for the Greek word theater, but they were small storefront theaters decorated to resemble vaudeville theaters. A live piano player often added music, but these silent films transcended language barriers. They were an hour long and they became incredibly popular for immigrants coming into America, attempting to acclimate themselves to our culture. Between 1907 and 1910, the audiences grew from 5,000 to 10,000. By 1910, the movies had become a major industry. Edison attempted to have another piece of the pie and in 1908 created the Motion Picture Patents Company, known as the Trust. The company pooled patents in an effort to control major film technology and acquired most major film distributorships. And signed an exclusive deal with George Eastman, who agreed to supply movie film only to trust-approved companies. As Southern California offered the cheapest labor, the most diverse scenery for outdoor filming, and the mild climate for year-round filming, Hollywood became the film capital of the world. Independent producers seeking to avoid legal battles with Edison's trust company were also known for slipping across the border to Mexico to avoid persecution. So two out-of-the-box thinkers, also Hungarian immigrants, Adolf Zukor and William Fox, branched out of the trust and formed their own production operations. Zukor went on to form Paramount Pictures and Fox formed 20th Century Fox. Although the trust broke up in 1917 over restraint of trade violations, Paramount Pictures and 20th Century Fox still contributed to major manipulative corporate strategies, attempting to also hold large pieces of the pie. The aim for dominating the movie business held three essential levels. First, the production, so everything involved in making a movie, from securing a script and actors raising money and filming. Second, distribution, getting the films into theaters. And thirdly, exhibition. This was playing the films in theaters. This vertical integration, which is controlling all levels of the process, gave studios power, eventually spawning the film industry into an oligopoly. And this is where films control the bulk of the business. Zukor, so the owner of Paramount Films, also took the control one step further and attempted to own contracts with all the actors that Americans seemed to prefer to watch. He created the Famous Players Company in 1912, attempting to do so with exclusive contracts. One member, Mary Pickford, was known as America's sweetheart for her portrayal of spunky and innocent heroines, was so popular with audiences that they waited in line to see her movies. She began to realize that she could leverage her salary more and became the first woman to make $100 million in 1 year, or $1 million in 1 year. In 1919, she launched the United Artists, a film distributing company with comedian Charlie Chaplin. Having already appeared in over 200 films, she tried her hand at the business. But by 1920, the studios took back control from the actors and the creative talent industry. They had so much control over the industry, and mainly by three big of the But by 1920, the studios took back control from the actors and the creative talent industry. Much like the big three in television, the big five arose from the studio world. We have Paramount, MGM, Warner Brothers, 20th Century Fox, RKO, and the Little Three, which included Columbia, Universal, and United Artists. D.W. Griffith was among the first directors, the single most important director in Hollywood's earliest days. He paved the way for all future narrative filmmakers by refining many of the techniques introduced by Méliès and Porter and using nearly all of them in one film. So these techniques included varied camera distance, close-up shots, multiple storylines, fast-paced editing, and symbolic imagery. America's first full-length film was directed and produced by D.W. Griffith in 1915. It was called The Birth of a Nation. It is 3 hours long, and at $2 a pop, it became the first blockbuster. Although it did glorify the KKK, so this led to immense protests, but the full-length feature film found a home in Hollywood, making it the standard length for moviegoers. Still silent, the film took on genres to include comedy, westerns, spy films, war films, and much more. So a breakthrough in Bell Labs, which was AT&T's research arm in 1910, produced loudspeakers. And by 1927, Warner Brothers Studios produced The Jazz Singer, a feature-length film starring Al Johnson, who was a popular vaudeville singer and who wore blackface makeup as part of his act. The film was another racist addition to the historical film transitions, but the film offered musical numbers with a brief dialogue for a total of 354 spoken words. The breakthrough film, The Singing Fool, in 1928 cost $200,000 to make and took in $5 million, guaranteeing that talkies were here to stay. Then, in 1927, Fox Studios' sound film newsreels captured the first film footage with the sound of the takeoff and return of Charles Lindbergh's first solo nonstop flight across the Atlantic Ocean. The U.S. owned the innovation of sound, and annual movie attendance in the U.S. rose from 600 million a week in 1927 to over 900 million a week in 1929. By 1935, the world had welcomed talkies as the commercial standard. So Hollywood created the standard for storytelling narrative of film, much to the thanks of D.W. Griffith and others to come after him, like Steven Spielberg. The allure of the narrative is not just telling the story, but how it's told, and as well as in what type of decor or genre. American pop culture began to take the lead on storytelling once more, and many historians contribute our leading cultural influence due to the fact that America portrays a blend of class systems. So our productions include a story for the average person, not just one aspect. We are also the home of some of the most pivotal inventions in the industry, including the motion picture, the genres of movies, and most recently Netflix and Amazon and the internet. Our programming seems to appeal to a global audience as our films are relatable at all acts of life, from rich to poor, young to old. American culture uplifts the American dream, and that it seems to be contagious in any culture.